Good evening, everybody. It's so nice to have you with us this afternoon. My name is Ann Collins Goodyear. I'm the co-director of the Bowdoin College Museum of Art, and it is a pleasure to welcome you to In the Fullness of Time, a conversation with Abigail DeVille and Daniel Minter. Our program this afternoon is inspired both by the museum's current exhibition, Abigail DeVille, In the Fullness of Time, and by the work of Daniel Minter, a beautiful example of which, a distant Holla from the mouth of the new Meadows River, we are honored to have represented in our collection. It is now on view in Currents, Art Since 1875, curated by our colleague Casey Braun. This evening, I'm pleased to have an opportunity to explore the complex nature of temporality as reflected in the work of Daniel Minter and Abigail DeVille. Each of these remarkable artists looks through their practice closely at the nature of history and considers the question of how and why we see ourselves in particular ways as individuals and as communities. As visual artists deeply engaged with the materiality of their mediums, their investigation is both literal and figurative. To structure our conversation this evening, I have juxtaposed examples of specific works by each artist that raise important questions about human history, our relationship to place, and about the very legacies embedded in visual expression itself. At the conclusion of the structured portion of our conversation, we look forward to opening the floor to questions from the audience. On that note, it is my pleasure to introduce a bit more fully our two distinguished panelists. Based in New York City, Abigail DeVille is an artist who uses history as a medium to envision a new future. Among DeVille's many honors are awards from the Joan Mitchell Foundation, the Edward and Sally Van Leer Fund of the New York Community Trust, and Creative Capital. In 2015, she also received the Obie Award for Design for her work as a scenic and costume designer on Prophetica, an oratorio, a production at La Mama Experimental Theater Club. In 2017, she was awarded a Rome Prize from the American Academy in Rome for the 2017 to 2018 academic year. And in 2022, she received the anonymous Was a Woman Award. She has held residencies at the Studio Museum in Harlem from 2013 to 2014, and the International Studio and Curatorial Program in Brooklyn in 2012. And we are delighted that she recently held the Hallie K. Harrisburg 90 and Michael Rosenfeld Artist in Residency here at Bowdoin College during the academic year 2022 to 2023. Abigail DeVille received her BFA from the Fashion Institute of Technology and her MFA from Yale University. She has also studied at the Pratt Institute and the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture, where she returned as a faculty member in the summer of 2022. She is currently a Hodder Fellow at Princeton University, and an installation by Abigail inspired by George Washington Carver's legacy is now on view in The World Without End, the George Washington Carver Project at the California African American Museum until early March as part of the Getty Foundation's PST, or Pacific Standard Time project. And later this month, her work will be included in Prospect, New Orleans, where it will be on view until next February. Daniel Minter, based here in Mid-Coast, Maine, is the co-founder of Indigo Arts Alliance in Portland and the founding director of Maine Freedom Trails. His remarkable work on the interracial settlement on Malaga Island which was forcibly disbanded in 1912, has brought visibility to the unjust fate of that community. Like Abigail, Daniel Minter reaches into history to create artwork that enables us to understand more clearly the interaction between the past, the present, and the future. Daniel is known for his work in the mediums of painting and assemblage, and his practice also extends to printmaking, sculpture, and illustration. His work often deals with themes of displacement and diaspora, ordinary and extraordinary Blackness, spirituality in the Afro-Atlantic world, and the recreation of the meanings of home. Daniel is also an award-winning children's book illustrator. His publications include Going Home with Daddy, a 2020 Caldecott Honor recipient, Ellen's Broom, which received a Coretta Scott King Illustration Honor, Seven Spools of Thread, a Kwanzaa story, winner of the Best Book Award from the Oppenheim Toy Portfolio, and The Riches of Osceola McCarty, named an honor book by the Carter G. Woodson Awards. In 2004 and 2011, Daniel was commissioned to create Kwanzaa stamps for the U.S. Postal Service. His work has been collected and exhibited at institutions across the country, including the Bowdoin College Museum of Art. And he recently had a major exhibition at the Center for Maine Contemporary Art. Daniel is the recipient of 2 honorary doctorates in fine art, one from the Maine College of Art and Design in 2019, and one from Colby College in 2023. Please join me in welcoming Daniel Minter and Abigail DeVille to Bowdoin College. Well, Daniel and Abigail, as we begin our conversation this evening, I thought I might just pause for a moment to recall a project that initially brought us together maybe around a year and a half ago, the Parable Path Project, in which Indigo Arts Alliance and Bowdoin College were involved. It was a wonderful opportunity to bring together a community to meditate on the work of Octavia Butler, and specifically her groundbreaking book, The Parable of the Sower. The Parable Project had the wonderful conclusion and culmination of an opera created by Toshi Regan. Abigail, you're very familiar with that piece. Your work was included in her operatic interpretation of Octavia Butler's work. And I thought I would just start there for a moment, both to bring back that moment in time, but also to think a little bit with both of you about the degree to which your work draws upon literature. I've been struck by the degree of literary references in your work. Daniel, of course, you've been very much involved in creating and producing books. Abigail, literary references run throughout your work, including, of course, in Lullaby, which we can speak about in a moment. But I thought I would just start there and perhaps ask you each to reflect a little bit on some of the themes of history, time travel, temporality in Octavia Butler's work, which originally brought us together, and perhaps to meditate, if you would, just for a moment, about the way in which each of your work touches upon a broad range of different media, including literature, and the ways in which perhaps works such as Octavia Butler's have also created an environment in which your work crosses both artistic boundaries as well as engaging in different modes of temporality. So a mouthful. I promised I wouldn't talk throughout this event, and I'm going to try to restrain myself.
Okay, you want to go ahead?
No, you go ahead.
Of course you say that. Okay, well, I guess in in thinking about that, one of the things about Parable of the Sower and Octavia Butler's work, it's very, very much about survival and about being able to survive unpredicted circumstance as well as predicted circumstance. My history in my work and my work with children's book, that in a way is also about survival. You know, it's about survival of a connection to history, to the places where we're from, and then with the children's book, it's definitely about survival. I do the children's books not because I love doing children's books. I do the children's books out of a sense of responsibility. I'm an illustrator. I'm able to tell stories with my work. So and these stories needed to be told. I didn't have children's books when I was growing up that had people who looked like me. That was just I just didn't have that. And I wanted to make sure that some of the stories were told with the sensibilities that sensibilities and care, that would prepare people, for young children, for the situations that they will come into, whether they are foreseen or unforeseen. Yeah.
I think maybe in terms of thinking about Octavia Butler, like when you sent the slideshow and I looked at all of the images of our work together, I immediately thought, oh, these are all portals. And I think that she constructs multiple kinds of portals, like moving forwards and backwards in time, but also a means of escape. And not escapism as in, but in terms of what he's saying, in terms of like strategies of survival. But I think, this is going to sound abstract, so forgive me, but I think a lot about the potential of a period at the end of a sentence, or thinking about a circle or a hollow or a kind of darkness or an open mouth or the cavity of a stomach, or thinking about the interior life of things versus external forces. And I think that she provides multiple ways in which you can read that through contemporary events, but then also making meaning of what it means to exist right now and how much we are indebted to and tied to the past, but we're not bound by it.
Also, that exists right now also makes me think about how her right now is, you know what I mean? It's not this moment. It's expansive, expansive. It expands and contracts, as far as the right now.
I love the way in which each of your comments help to open up the question of storytelling, but also the question of even the physicality of a text. I love what you say, Abigail, about the space of a period at the end of a sentence, for example. And I think that provides sort of a nice launch pad to think perhaps about the first comparison that I've brought together. And I just want to stress that there's nothing necessarily magical about these comparisons, but in looking at Daniel's work and Abigail's work, it was a pleasure to try to pull together pieces that I thought had really interesting formal similarities or thematic similarities. And Daniel and Abigail, I look forward to your observations. As I mentioned earlier, we are really thrilled and honored to have Daniel's work in the collection of the museum. This is a piece that I find incredibly powerful, A Distant Holla from the Mouth of the New Meadows River. I think the title itself suggests the narrative, a historical narrative in which it engages. And Daniel, I'd love it if you could unpack that for us. Abigail, I'll let you say a little bit about the nature of Lullaby and its literary inspiration. One of the things that, there are a few things and I'm so thrilled, I should mention that this piece is currently on view in Abigail's show, but when I juxtapose these works, there are so many similarities that I found incredibly poignant. Abigail, you talked about the space of a period at the end of the sentence. I love the way in which each of these pieces seem to have hand gestures, which are about holding space. I found that incredibly moving. I love the way in which two female figures are crowned. I find that extremely beautiful. I also find very interesting the invocation of the color blue, indigo, perhaps, by both pieces, which make me think of maritime environments, but also there seems to be a way in which the cosmos or the heavens are invoked as well. So these different forces that seem to be pulling us in different directions. So both pieces, to me, seem to exist in a space that may be between worlds. And so I'd love, if I might, to invite each of you to offer your own reflections on these pieces and perhaps the relationships or perhaps even the distinctions that you see activated between them.
Well, I would say one thing is the sense of presence is immediate in both, and they both have this a weighted stance in the pieces, and also they're both like doorways. They're both calling you in, pulling you in, and giving you opportunities. Opportunities or options. So I'm seeing the options with each of the figures there, and also the option with the hand open there. In the pieces that I have that I make, I usually include openings, doorways, or boxes or places that hold things within the piece. Anything you see, Abigail, in there?
I mean, the blue is so strong, it's undeniable, but in terms of like, as a grounding force for, I think, both works, it moves your eye around the work, or it's the thing that's on the periphery. And I think, like, I'm just going to say this, but, blue being on the periphery of kind of our understandings, right? Or thinking about how the blue of the sky is an optical illusion, right? And so then thinking about the thing that is like most plentiful, which is maybe the oceans or the sky, right? Like there's ways in which you can access blue at any time of the day. But thinking about that as being a marriage that's happening between and undergirding the structure of both works. That's something that is plentiful and also impenetrable in terms of understanding, and also not actually able to grasp, right? Like there's like maybe 4 or 5 things that in nature are naturally blue, and everything else is not, right? And so it's like, so then what actually is blue? Like anyway.
Daniel, I wonder, before we move on, if you might want to say a quick word about the story that you're unpacking in your work. It's such an important one.
Mm-hmm. Well, in this particular piece, I wanted to include a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different lives, a lot of different ways of living, and show the fullness of life on the fullness of life of the people who lived on the island. There's the different people in different directions. Some of them representing actual people. Some of them representing actual people who are alive now. Some of them are totally imagined. But the idea that these people were forced from the island is something that I try to overcome in these pieces, in that because I believe that their presence is still there, and I like to show that there is very much a presence with each of the individuals that I create, each of the figures that I create that help recall that story of Malaga Island, that story of the history of Malaga Island.
And Abigail, I love the way in which your piece responds a little bit to a story, to a poem, and invokes in part the work of Langston Hughes. It's a dialogue that I find very poignant. And I also love the way in which your piece, like Daniel's, implies a continuity of generations, as well as a sense of a community of individuals.
Yeah, the poem "Inspiration Lullaby." It's talking about the stars, the moon. It's a lullaby that a mother sings to her child before they go to sleep. But it's talking about the continuity of everything, right? And also about dreaming, right? That there is no limitations, right? There's no limitations to the stars or the moon, or like our distance from human to human, our distance from it is the same, right? So then what kind of imagery or does that unlock in the imagination of a child? And I think this is like a subtext thing that I insert in everything, but I'm also always thinking about the middle passage and inserting that in everything. And so thinking about also the blue of like the Atlantic Ocean. And I had this experience once, which do with it what you may. I was maybe in a really bad mental state where, I know no one has experienced this before, where you have the same kind of reoccurring thought happening over and over again, like a hamster wheel or something, and you can't escape it. And I was on a flight from Miami to Oslo, and it was the first time I realized that I was on a plane that went over the Atlantic Ocean from that distance, from there to there. And somewhere over the Atlantic, it was like somebody slammed a door shut, and my thoughts, the spinning wheel stopped, and there was all of this like quiet and peace. And it made me instantly think of like all of the ancestors that I will never know that are at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, right? Like the people that got deposited in the ocean who didn't make it on the trip to the United States or to the quote unquote New World. So I like, there's ways in which the things that happen that are unexplainable, that can't be easily packaged or explained, right? That are also things that are seeds that are embedded within the work too.
Sorry, wrong direction. I think that question of these of environments is so interesting, and the idea, Abigail, of even how you being in an airplane had a sense of your connection literally to the ocean is so interesting to me. And one of the things that I love about both of your works are the ways in which they occupy space. And I'm so interested in this notion of portals and windows and passageways that each of you has referenced about your work. So in this instance, I wanted to juxtapose two installations, one by each of you. Daniel, A Distant Holla, and Abigail, The Miser's Heart, which is a piece that was actually recently created for Bowdoin College. And I'll just mention a couple of things that just struck me in case they are of interest to both of you. But one of the aspects of the visual idiom that I found incredibly interesting was the way in which each of you, in using objects that have a pre-existing history, what we might call found objects, the way in which each of you specifically is incorporating brooms. Abigail, I find the juxtaposition, I don't know how easy it is for members of the audience to see that there's actually a black torso that's sort of installed near those brooms, which makes me think a little bit about the people, Daniel, in your piece. I love the way in which, Abigail, your piece really projects forward into our space, which is the same, Daniel, I think, in a sense, with that what almost feels like a doorway or a passageway that comes into our space. And then also, I'll just mention, Abigail, I've been interested in your literal use of technology. Light bulbs and lighting is an important feature of your work. Clocks, radios, televisions are referenced in other parts of your work in our exhibition. And Daniel, you have actually spoken about your work more broadly as a technology. So I was just interested maybe to hear each of your meditations upon these pieces and the larger issues that they may raise, or themes that they reveal about your work.
Also, Abigail, I'd like for you to tell us about the bottles. Because
That's a great question.
I love those bottles in the work. You know, it's like to me, it's a powerful talisman.
Yeah, I don't, the bottles, I think of them as experienced objects, or, or maybe surrogate to the body, right? Like we're all vessels to be filled up, right? There's so many metaphors for like bottles, but also like, thinking about spirits, right? And so there's the kind that is the intangible, right? Or there's the kind that you purposely consume to be intoxicated, right? I feel like there are different ways in which to enter through this idea of thinking through spirit. But I also was thinking like about the objects that are here in Bowdoin's collection. And so that's what some of these references are, like the printouts of some objects that are in Bowdoin's collection. But I thought it was pretty interesting in thinking about James Bowdoin III and the thesis that he had written when he was at Harvard. And I don't remember now exactly what it was, but there was a question about a labor issue.
Yeah, and markets.
Yeah, and it was since it's not, there was multiple fires or something, and the paper is long lost. And thinking about what this person could have been thinking about or talking about in that moment when they were, I think maybe 25 years old, newly married, fabulously wealthy, like man of his age, and wondering which side he fared on in terms of a question about the ethics of labor. But so some of these small objects, the little Egyptian funerary statuary I learned while I was here, were created after human sacrifices had ended, right? So maybe initially hundreds of people were buried with an emperor when he died, and then like fast forward, they were like, no, we're not gonna do it anymore. We're gonna put these statues in that are gonna serve as the workers in the afterlife. But I thought it was funny that there was a class system that was inescapable even in eternity, that some people have only been created to rule and some people have only been created to serve. And so that's also where the brooms come in, or thinking about the kind of scaffolding. Like the scaffolding belongs to Bowdoin. So, but when they installed it, it made this diamond formation, which I love because they're thinking about like the all-seeing eye or the diamond eye, which is also another reference to God, really, like that there is always maybe something higher than what you think, or there is something always that is watching, or something that is imperceivable, but there is a witnessing that is happening, and the thing that you think that you're doing that no one can see is actually being witnessed. And so it's being recorded in some kind of measure, right? Whether that is like natural or social or in whatever respect. And then there's lots of images from NASA from space, and actually the the solar eclipse that happened, right? When was that, in April 8th or something?
Yeah, it happened April 8th, I believe.
Yeah,
We had
so that little black hole right there is an image of that. So it's lots of referencing in terms of like thinking about seeing, because the iris of your eye is also a portal, right? And so then thinking about the multiple registers in which we live on continuously, but the things that are unseen that are shaping the world around us, the things that actually have been put in motion, maybe before you were born, before you got here today. But like, you know, we are actors and players together simultaneously, all in this thing that has been going on way before we got here. But it's trying to notate the multiple registers in which we exist, but also then how does that also factor into taste and collecting, and what is essentially like valued as like a classical collection or things that needed to be had, but then also the underpinnings of maybe unfair labor practices embedded within that.
That's great. There's you touched on so many things there in that, but I was going to talk about the comparison of the brooms in each piece. Also, the the brooms in my piece, they're a transformed object, and there are probably some bottles in this piece as well. You know, I use those quite a bit. But the brooms that I use in the work is a an object that I came across first in Brazil during a lavagem of a church, during a washing doing a washing of the area around the church, and cleaning and mopping and whitewashing, cleaning the place, and everyone coming with bringing their own broom, to do this work, and I was really struck by that power of that, taking that broom, this object, you know, of this object that is usually a lot of times associated with servitude, and transforming it into an object in which they connect to their spirituality, connect, you know, directly, you know, doing this deed that's going to uh, bring them closer to divinity. But then again, I encountered the brooms in a studio of James Washington Jr., who was a stone carver, an artist out in Seattle, who, after he passed, he wanted his studio to be turned into a place where artists could work, and I was tasked with being the first artist to be there, so I had to clean the place up, and so I was cleaning up his studio where he did a lot of his work, and I noticed that his brooms were not really functional, because they had been worn down. You know, all of the straw had been swept off of it and worn down to just like just very little bit of the broom left. And again, I thought about the power of that, and that all of the energy and effort of cleaning that had gone through this, that had passed through this object, and I could not throw any of those brooms away. I had to keep them, and I carved on them and turned them into talismans of cleaning, of objects of cleaning, and decided that the more they were worn down, the more powerful they were, because the more work they had done, the more energy had gone through them, and the idea that the broom, you know, that the cleaning with the broom is a perfect, is a perfect connection to self, because you are removing you're removing the things that you do not want. And you're not just removing things that you do not want from the floor, you're also removing things that you do not want from your body as you flow that energy from yourself to do this thing. And that's what a broom does. So I kept these objects that had been imbued with this energy and used them within my artwork and different things. That's sort of the idea behind the brooms whenever I use them in the work. And as you see in your bottles, all these bottles there, and reminded me of a story about Ogun, the Orisha of the forest, of war, and of opening paths, and is generally usually associated with a sword or a machete. And Ogun encountered a bunch of men sitting around in the woods. They were all drunk, and he saw all of these bottles, sitting there, bottles sitting there in front of them, and he stood there with them, and none of them offered him a drink. And he saw that they had all been drinking, but none of them offered him a drink. So he killed them. So he slashed them and killed them all. And then when he went around to the bottles, he noticed they were all empty. They had all empty. The bottles were all emptied, so they could not offer him a drink because they did not have one. And he felt, Ogun is always feeling terrible about the things that he does like that. And he ended up, and so he went and slayed himself and killed himself afterwards. So when you drink, when your bottle is empty, you lay it down so that Ogun will know that it's empty. You don't leave an empty bottle sitting upright in presence. Okay, so you lay it down. Okay, so that's
a cautionary tale.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But I love this notion of energy, Daniel, that you were describing. In a sense, flowing through that parable, but also through the broom, this idea of human energy, what we might even describe perhaps as something of a quantum exchange of energy. And on that topic, this is a juxtaposition that I find incredibly intriguing for many reasons. One of the reasons is that these are, in a sense, both, we might say, sort of artworks in three parts. There are three panels in Daniel's piece. I'm cheating a little bit, Abigail, with the relationship between Lunar Capsule and Azul, but there are these three components nonetheless. The Lunar Capsule is, in theory at least, nested within Azul, which is in an open position. The Lunar Capsule sort of invites our bodies in, and I love the presence of the bodies in Daniel's work. And so I'd love to invite you each to speak a little bit about these works. Abigail, I love the fact that your Lunar Capsule, I think you've described it as actually literally functioning as a time capsule of sorts. I feel that when I look at the architecture of it, it makes me think of the Apollo 11 capsule, which is well over 50 years in the past, yet it seems to invite visions of the future at the same time. Daniel, I love the way in which these individuals are internested within environments that could almost be cellular in nature, and there does seem to be a way in which there is a vibrant movement across the surface, which makes me think a little bit about the action of the vessel, Abigail, that is part of your Lunar Capsule. So again, I invite your reflections both on these individual pieces and also on the relationships that you may see between them, or the questions that you may have for one another about these objects.
Only question I got for you about that is, can I have that spaceship?
No.
I think the thing that maybe is like tripping me out right now, well, how much the imagery looks like lace or crocheting, but it's also mimicking the kind of diagrams when you think about how space fabric moves and different kinds of like illustrations of how weight functions in space or planetary movements. Like, but there's a charting that's happening with the circles and all of and all three works.
I'm fascinated with that capsule because I remember very well, the first lunar landing, and and just, and watching it on television, on black and white TV. This little image that barely moved, just sitting there, you just going, and I thought it was so exciting, and and then I would run outside and look up, and then my imagination would take over, and I always imagined myself inside that capsule, and being able to actually, experience what they were experiencing, and that. So I'm just. I think that's a really powerful symbol. It's almost like a bottle, or yes, in a way, it looks like a bottle. But the way I think about space travel, though, is without the use of the machine in so much thinking. In this, like for this piece over here, it's also about travel, but it's about spiritual travel, and it's about the things you access from the world of living things that are around you, in order to access that, the ability to gain vision or understanding of the things that you don't normally see, and understand how you fit into that stream of all living things. And when you realize that you are part of all of these living things in the world, there really is there's no distance you cannot travel, you cannot cross, when you realize that all of the things that are around you are also you.
I love that. I'm going to move on to our next comparison. Speaking of travel, this was a comparison I found very poignant. Speaking again about vessels, containers. Daniel, your commerce vessel juxtaposed Abigail with your Howl of Maine, which is an artwork that references the ship that Henry Hudson sailed up the river that now holds his name. And while it doesn't speak specifically, perhaps, to the Middle Passage, I find its implications very poignant in that regard, in terms of this larger question of what are the vessels that bring us places, how do we travel, and what are the implications, perhaps, of the relationship between travel, transportation, commerce. And Daniel, when I look at the structure of your piece, I can't help but see something that reminds me a little bit of the physical outline of the 48 states of the United States. I don't know if that's intentional or if it's just something I read into it, but I love the way in which that resonates also, Abigail, with the way in which your work incorporates an American flag. So those were some relationships that I saw in these pieces, and would welcome your thoughts.
Abigail.
Daniel,
Yes.
it's so haunting to me the way in which these forms occupy those very tight little spaces, and the way in which maybe you even ask us to consider the nature of vessel and commerce in your piece.
The you know, that piece came about thinking about the prison system, you know, and the way it is really designed to it's I feel like it's designed to as another way of storing us within a stationary slave ship, and so I also think about the industrial nature of it, of the prisons, and the industrial mechanical nature of it. And that's why I wanted to use, that's why I used the cans to represent that. And also the cans, usually cans denote countless multitudes, because they're just, you know, just like they're replicated, just one after the other, you know, in mass. Mm-hmm.
What's inside the ones that are facing front?
Oh, bodies are inside. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It also looks like a shield.
It's a ship.
Yeah.
Yes, it's the cross section of a ship.
Oh, it's a cross section of a ship. And Abigail, did you also use the word shield?
I said shield, yeah.
That's
Mm-hmm.
that's
It
beautiful.
also looks like a shield, a police shield.
Right. Only in the interests of time, these pieces are so evocative. There's no way to unpack them all fully, but it's just fun to bring these together. And Abigail, I had the best time hearing your response.
I just couldn't believe it. Yeah, I mean, they're in conversation with one another. It's kind of wild, like to see the two next to one another.
Yeah, I was fascinated with this piece when I saw it in there. With the axe, and it's just such a powerful piece, and I mean, to me it looks like it's still growing, you know, in a way. It's calling for more.
It's so poignant to me to see the imagery of the tree and just the layered nature in which one thing is literally growing out of another. And then Abigail, Daniel's work got me thinking a little bit more about Soul Sister, which is a piece I love, and which I think originally was a portion of Halve Main. And I thought initially about that metal component as being a little bit like a rudder when I thought of it in the context of a ship. But then Daniel, when I looked at your work, you got me thinking more about Abigail's piece and the question of whether we could actually read that as a scythe, which I also found very poignant.
You mean a scythe for cutting?
For cutting, yeah. And it is interesting. I love, Daniel, what you said earlier about what it means to cut away. And I was recently reading about the etymology of the word decide, which, as some of you may know, literally does mean to trim away. So it's exciting to think both about what we include and maybe also what we let go. I just have a couple of other comparisons, and then I'm eager to open things up to the audience. this was a piece that I love. Daniel, these two really interesting pieces, states of, which are clearly, well, to me at least, clearly invoking the question of American commerce, maybe the question of the individuals who back up our vision of American commerce, currency. Abigail, the two pieces that I juxtaposed this with from your work are both from the Libertas series. One is entitled Columbia. I know the name was inspired in part by the exercise bike that is included there, but makes me think about the figure of Columbia that embodies the United States. And then Dark Matter, No Matter, which is an amazing piece, which makes me giggle on some level, but also I think really helps us to think a little bit about the implications of the space program, the exploration of the cosmos, who's going there. And it's, I think, very much this exploration of space, this mythology of, American growth now up into the skies that we associate ourselves with. So I'd be so interested to hear your reflections on these pieces.
Both of these pieces I'd love to see, I would love for me to pull them around, to pull them around different places, just because they both appear to be mobile, and and I think that they both, depending on where you locate them, will have different meanings. And different impacts. So I would love to walk around with this. This almost looks like almost looks like a person to me. This one, a person repaired in a way, or a person, yes, repaired. And this one, it looks like a weapon. Mm-hmm.
I've been wanting to do that for a long time. I just haven't done it yet. It's like, maybe not these two works in particular, but I love things on wheels, or thinking about making works that are talking about history but on wheels, and then just like dragging it through the street.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me, Abigail, that these two, I'm glad you picked up on the wheels, Daniel, and commented on that. It's interesting to me to see the language of wheels and locomotion that is so frequently present in your work. And Daniel, that also makes me think a little bit about the presence of circles in your pieces, but I specifically just wanted to hone in on the eye, which is so prominent, and which is prominent in so many of your pieces. And Abigail, earlier, you had been speaking a little bit about the notion of vision, and the way in which the piece that you created here at Bowdoin can both be understood perhaps as an image of the solar eclipse, but also as a pupil and an eye.
Yes. Well, I use the eyes. So much of my work is figurative, and there's figures in the work, because I love using I like denoting the presence of the human presence, the presence of ourselves, and I like for people to be able to see themselves in some way in each piece of work that I do. But the eyes are also, for me, denotes awareness. Simply awareness first and foremost is awareness of situations and surroundings. The curvatures that you're seeing in there it's another tool transformed. It's a scale. It's a scale for weighing cotton, and that shape, is to me that they all have that curvature on them, but that's also a shape that is easily turned into a weapon. It's also, can be, I've got some of them turned upside down, right side up. They can be, used as a walking stick, or whatever. But this series, States of, is a series of collage pieces that I worked on, and it was really painful series for me to work on, because it was just I was doing a lot of reading about money and the U.S., and realized that our bodies were meant to be money, were a form of trade and money and currency, and so that the systems of trading and using money so many systems were built upon the way that our bodies were traded, that is still, there are traces of it still in the way that things function today. And so I felt like that was a big reason why the prison system was so profitable, for this country, and that the monetary system was never really meant for us to use it, because because we were the money, and we still are the money. And I feel like the system was perfected with Black people, but I feel like everybody in this country is being transformed into currency by the systems, because that's what those systems are for. That's the way they work. That's what they do. So because I hear people say it all the time, but they usually say it jokingly. If there's no charge for it, then you're the product. If it's free, then you're the product. But yes, you are the product. And your data, the information about you, that is a currency, and others can use it, but you can't use it. They profit from that, but you can't profit from the information about yourself. So you are turned into currency, and that's why this was such a difficult piece for me to work on, because it was just there were just so many things that just rang true to me.
It's a poignant piece, and I'm going to this is the final pair of slides I want to bring up. Then I want to open things up to the audience. But Daniel, your words are very poignant, and I think demonstrate, to my mind, the powerful currency that both of your works bring forward, in the sense of creating themes that I think do course through time, course through our own lived experiences. And I want perhaps just to conclude on this notion of home. And Daniel, it's something that you've thought so much about in your work. Abigail, it's also something that I see being so present in your objects. And so I just wanted to bring together here, just as a point of conclusion, Daniel, two pieces by you that really do, I think, convey this notion of, to my mind anyway, home, or a space held for dwelling. I love the story that you told us earlier about those brooms and the sense of energy that they can convey. I love the notion of a space literally being held physically in the gesture of your subject, and literally in the center of the chest or the heart of your other subject. And then Abigail, Bronx Floors, of course, refers specifically to your grandmother and to the home that she occupied and that you occupied with her. maybe you could each just say a couple words about what home means to you.
Mhm. Wow. I could speak a lot about that, but I guess simply put, it's uh, home is. I mean, it's I make it a very simple. I usually just that shape to me um, represents home, um, but it's not necessarily about place. It's about the idea that you can you can belong wherever you are, and it goes back to that sense, back to that thing I was talking about when you realize that everything around you is also you, is also a part of you, and that you can make yourself at home. You can make this place a home for you, no matter where it is in this world, because we all belong to this world.
Thank you. And Abigail?
I mean, similarly, I was thinking, yeah, it's you. I mean, you are the home. You live in you, and wherever you are, you're home. So I don't know if I can. I don't think I have more to say about that. Just off of the fact that I think in terms of this presentation, or thinking about these particular works as like a stand-in for home, I think it's the basis of the Bronx floors is theater flats, right? And so then thinking about what's hidden behind that, or what's beneath that, but then the fact that it's referencing other works, I think it's not about maybe like the theatricality, but also maybe the impossibility of trying to materially tack down what it means to be at home, or what it means to own something or to have something. And so then it's more about the traces that are left behind, like the floor tiles that they walked on, or the cigarettes that my grandmother breathed through, right? It's the evidence of existence more than it is about claiming hold to some space or having a title deed to a home. So I think, yeah, it's more about the kinds of fragments that are left versus the occupation of space.
Thank you both so much for your beautiful thoughts and for the objects, the perhaps in some senses the fragments of your thoughts that you offer to us, around which I think our thoughts cluster. And on that note, we have such an extraordinary group here in the audience. I do want to be respectful of people's time, but I thought I would just open the floor perhaps to one or two questions or reflections from members of the audience.
Hi, thank you for your talk. I was very interested in hearing about how your works like survive and extends through time and space. And I was curious about like your relationship with your art and thinking about that, and how you use materials that are already imbued with energy, and how you negotiate and discuss and work with that art to extend through time. How does like your art challenge you, or how do you want to challenge yourself to work more with art? What has it taught you? How has it changed through your life, your journey, and the storytelling that goes on with your art? Really just getting around the idea, like when we look at your art, where are you in this art? Not just like your ideas, but can we see you in it? Or to what extent are you withholding yourself and speaking to new ideas that extend beyond you, if that makes sense?
Well, uh, I mean, thinking about, seeing me in the art. It's my primary way of communication. It's my primary way of of knowing where I am what is my primary way of thinking through through a situation is, and my primary way of connecting to the earth, to the world. So I'm always in it. I've always have a presence in it. If not literally, in the imagery that is there, then my movement is there. My movements in the line work is there. My movement in the of my blade is etched into is in the wood. It's there. So it's my mark.
I think I'm more like, is it Mickey Mouse and Fantasia with the magic wand with all of the things? Like, I'm a little bit more like that, where I like the residue of other people's lives and then making a concert with that. So it's not necessarily me thinking about me, even though it's coming from you, so you can't be divorced from it. But it's all of the processes that you do in order to be able to prepare to make a work. It's all the information that you ingested that's getting cooked and then somehow comes out through your fingers and the actions and the movements that you make. And so I call it informed intuition, but it's like working from a place that has no words. Like, that's why you make stuff, because you can't actually explain it or you can't write it down. And it's a way of of working with experiential knowledge, which I value a lot. So then how can you transfer one experience to another without one word being said?
Beautiful. Are there any?
Hi, I don't know if this fits in, but what I was thinking is that for both of you, it seems that the work is inviting the viewer, because I'm a viewer, I'm not the maker, but it's inviting the viewer to rethink what she thought she knew, or experience what seemed to be perhaps at least known or accepted before. And so I guess that's just an observation.
Pam, thank you. I love these reflections on the nature of your presence and our presence in relation to these pieces. And also, Abigail, what you said earlier about the way in which this piece reminds us both of what's visible and what's not visible. And Daniel, I feel like your work does that so beautifully as well. We see the surface, but we're reminded of what lies behind it. And I think in many ways that's probably what makes art interesting for all of us, is this opportunity to try to penetrate below the surface. And I want to thank both of you so much for helping us perhaps to penetrate a little bit further below the surface of your work. And I want to thank our wonderful audience for being here. Thank you so much.